I won't say any more about it, but a bit later at the end, perhaps. As Jeannie said, we're continuing the debate about looking after ourselves, basically. And so we're going to start with an example of what they're doing in Essex. And then we're going on to a personal testimony of one of our colleagues who's, as it were, been on the receiving end of that. So I think it's right to give a warning that some things we may hear may be distressing. And so please bear that in mind. And, you know, like everything else, if something does distress you and you need to find someone to talk to at the end, make sure you are able to do so. So without any ado, I'll welcome our first speaker, Amy Balby, who is from Essex. She is going to talk about secondary trauma and compassion fatigue in social care, and she's with the Families and Social Care in Essex, as I said. So, Amy, over to you.
Hello, thank you very much. So I'm new to Zoom. I'm going to minimise you so I can see my notes. So if anyone's got your hands up, I'm sorry, I won't be able to see you. So if you just alert me to that, that would be great. As Peter said, I'm here to talk to you about a piece of COVID-19 secondary trauma and compassion fatigue training, which ECC, Essex County Council, has provided for our social care teams and the outcomes of that. So to start with, if I give you a little bit of background, so due to the COVID-19 pandemic, social workers in Essex are working quite differently. They're working at home or in the office with social distancing and health and safety restrictions for this foreseeable future. So can you hear me okay? I'm having a technical issue this end. I seem to have a frozen computer, but you can still hear me, so that's good.
We can hear you.
Yeah, we can.
You're not frozen on our screens.
Lovely, good. I think it's because I'm quite far away from the router singing here. So because of these changes, there are changes to working practices, changes to access to support systems, workload, and the environments in which social work is taking place. So social workers may be experiencing things in their personal lives as well, so social, financial, family and personal issues which are linked to the pandemic. Due to the nature of social work, even before COVID, there's a recognised risk of secondary trauma and compassion fatigue, and a document from the British Psychological Society on this subject, but linked to the pandemic, was shared by one of our directors, and the document highlighted the potential impact of COVID changes in working practices on our workers. And this was specifically around increased working from home, so the boundary between work and home life is getting eroded. Personal home space might become associated with dealing with trauma, abuse and violence, and there may be less access to support systems because of the virtual working and social distancing that's happening at the moment. So our social workers are doing a mixture. They're doing part in their normal offices, but with COVID secure measures in place, and partly working from home. So therefore we decided to develop a bespoke training programme to address this, and I called on my colleague, who I think you all know, Emma Dodgson, and her expertise in this area. So the training was aimed at frontline social workers across adult social care and children and families social care, and it took the form of an initial front-loaded 2-part lecture, and we followed it by 4 smaller workshops which were designed to be a safe space and cathartic in nature. 4 of the workshops were for social care and 1 was for mental health first aiders, and talking to them about how they might support our social workers. So the training was delivered by 2 speakers, a disaster recovery expert who I expect you all know, Lucy Easthope, I'm not sure if she's on the call this evening, and a trauma specialist, David Shemmings, both of whom have got extensive experience of working with social care. So we had 126 social workers attending the initial lecture, and they were a mixture of adult and children's social workers. Social workers were encouraged to contribute during the 2 lectures and 4 workshops via a variety of mediums. So we asked them to contribute verbally, via the Teams chat facility, informal feedback after the sessions, and through formal feedback forms. So through all these, through this input and this feedback, there were some key themes which emerged again and again. So to work through them, they were well-being was probably the top one that came out, unsurprisingly, and people spoke about feeling emotionally depleted, that they knew support existed within ECC for them, but they had a lack of time to access that support. They felt their resilience had been compromised, and there was a general concern for mental health, both themselves, the people that they work with, as in our service users, their families as well. And they felt that there was a real need for wellbeing time. The next big issue, which was kind of right up there with wellbeing, was capacity. So people described themselves as feeling at breaking point, saying there was no slack in the system, no time to reflect on complex cases which were coming through. They felt they were upset that they were unable to deliver their usual standard of social care, and that this wasn't business as usual, and that we needed to stop calling it business as usual and perhaps take stock and reset our baseline. And specifically to social care, they were thinking about the purposes of the visits they were carrying out. There was a lot of talk around whether we were causing more damage rather than benefit in some cases, especially with children with disabilities, taking into account the fact that these social workers are turning up in PPE, and it's quite a different setting for the visit than what our service users would be used to. And then the third thing was work location. So the thing that kicked off the training in the first place was around working from home. So people described working from home feeling that they were vulnerable, that it was intrusive, concerns around GDPR, having no downtime, the impact on their families, and the loss of team support, leaving people feeling quite isolated at times. But conversely, in the office, people didn't feel much better. There was, fear of infection, and things in the office are very different in terms of social distancing and COVID secure measures. The fourth theme that came through was culture. So people spoke a lot about social care culture in general, and this kind of expectation that social workers can cope with anything. So they're not taking lunch breaks. They don't feel they can take or enjoy their annual leave. And with the workload being what it is, they just don't feel that they have an off switch at the moment. The next thing was information overload. So people describe themselves as being too accessible from a technology point of view. So since COVID for us, we've introduced Teams. So suddenly people being contacted on Teams along with all the other pieces of technology we had in place beforehand. People also described an overwhelming level of information, general information, but also all the information coming out about COVID, both corporately and from social care, and that they'd got this real fear that they were going to miss something important, and that their admin had kind of shot through the roof as well in terms of being asked for data, surveys, targets, all things that have to be fed up at a national level that we're being asked for. And they also spoke about case complexity. They've not seen an increase in workload particularly, but the cases that we're getting are really complex, and confusing and conflicting comms as well was mentioned. So the next theme was recognition. People felt in social care they'd been forgotten as key workers, varying level of thanks from their own teams and managers, and felt that at times there was a lack of senior leadership understanding about what they've been going through on the front line. And perhaps unrealistic expectations coming from above. And we spoke about, and I know Lucy's a big fan of the power of a handwritten thank you and what a difference that can make. And there was a bit of disparity we discovered across social care in terms that a handwritten thank you had gone out to children's but not to adults. And then the last key theme that came through was around PPE. So people talking about how this really impacted on their service delivery, that they lost an awful lot of time on their visit to reassuring the service user around the fact that they were wearing PPE where that was indicated, and saying that they couldn't achieve the visit purpose in all cases because of it, especially when working with children with disabilities. And adults reported that this was difficult with people who are hard of hearing if you've got a mask over your face. So there was a lot of talk around whether we're visiting too often, not enough, and is it damaging to the service users, and are we causing them secondary trauma in some way? So those were the themes that came from our social workers, and then we had some key recommendations that came from both our speakers, and these are recommendations for leadership. So they spoke about how we need leadership to reset their thinking and embrace that this is for the long haul with a 10-year plus recovery period. I think until a few months ago, there was very much this feeling that actually in 2021, this will all be fine. To think about the fact that families will probably want answers going forward, complex bereavements, and we're likely to see an increase in complaints, FOI requests and absenteeism. So a piece of advice from our speakers was to upscale admin support to cope with this going forward. As I've mentioned, Lucy spoke a lot about never underestimating the power of a handwritten personal thank you, that we need to be ready for concurrent disasters, that we need to brief our service users on what 2021 will look like to enable us to manage their expectations. And we also need to think about the fact that we can't deliver in 2020 and 2021 what we delivered in 2019. So it links back to the social workers feeling they weren't doing a good enough job. And we also spoke extensively about no traumatic work at home, linking back to the whole point of the training in the first place in terms of causing secondary trauma for our social workers. So how we must provide safe spaces to work, identify extra office space if needed. And so we also needed to consider, are the things we're doing in the short term jeopardising our long-term practice? And the sort of reassuring message that came through was experience shared by our speakers identified that months 6 to 9, which was when this training was happening and felt was really needed in any disaster, is a particularly difficult time. So I think that was really reassuring for the attendees. So feedback from the attendees was overwhelmingly positive. Social workers felt that their feelings had been validated and they'd been heard, and a lot of them left with a greater understanding around disaster recovery and a number of coping strategies. I think lots of them came to the training not really realising that they were in a disaster and they were a disaster responder now, and it had kind of given them a label almost to explain why they were going through what they were going through. So I guess the most important part of any training is what you do with the information that's come out of that training. So far, we've picked up on the themes, and this is a little kind of jaunt through of the things that we've done in ECC to try and take the matters forward. I will speak a little bit more about children's, as this is the function that I work for, so I've got a more limited knowledge of what adult social care are doing with it. So initially, the information was shared with the leadership team and children's social care, warts and all. They got the full feedback of everything that had been said on the training. And this led on to talks and requests for information from other managers. So I've been asked to give this feedback at kind of quadrant meetings, we call them, so different areas within social care, because, you know, it's good, the managers were interested and they wanted to try and do something with it. A wellbeing event has been organised by our Executive Director for the whole of children's social care, and this has been scheduled for early January. My understanding is of the event is going to be a bit of a fact-finding mission to start with, to really drill down on some of the points that came out of the training. Wellbeing initiatives have been put in place across adult social care, including some carved out wellbeing time, which was something that was specifically asked for in the training, so that's great. There's definitely been an increased push from senior leaders to remind staff not to book meetings during lunch breaks and to take time out as they need it. So we were finding that people's diaries were just bursting, so they were kind of wall-to-wall meetings all day with no downtime possible. Some team managers have included a wellbeing segment in their weekly team meetings, and there's just generally more of an awareness of the importance of wellbeing at the moment from all levels. And you'll be pleased to know, Lucy, handwritten thank yous are making an appearance. Some have gone out. So we can't take all the credit for the next one, but ECC on a corporate level are currently running a corporate We Make a Difference event at the moment. So I think it's been a 2-week event, which includes non-work related free workshops, but during work time. So you're not being asked to kind of tag this on to the end of your day. And it's almost a way of carving out some wellbeing time for people to kind of send them off to make a Christmas decoration or to learn how to use their iPhone. So there's been all sorts of topics. There's been some work around PPE and the possibility of using clear masks, but this is still being worked through as we're not sure that they're going to meet the criteria of PPE, and there'll be more of a face covering, so can only be used in some settings. And all these findings have been incorporated into an accommodation paper, which has gone to our members to take the themes into account when they're considering how we use our estate across ECC. So that's kind of linking back into making sure we've got the safe spaces for social workers to work in. Unfortunately, though, there is no denying that the issue around capacity still remains. So this is being something that's going to be worked through, I hope, going forward. So more widely than ECC, I don't know if they take part in this call, but Thurrock Council have been in touch hoping to replicate something similar in terms of a training course for their own staff. And last but not least, Partners in Practice, which is about sharing best practice in social care, a have asked our speakers, Lucy and David, to share this learning at a national best practice session next year. So that's great. And so I think that was everything I wanted to say. So thank you for listening. And if there's anything I've missed, Emma, I'm very happy for you to contribute at this point. There's bound to be something. And I'm also happy to take any questions or hear any observations. But that was just a quick jaunt through of what we've been up to.
Amy, thanks very much, Peter. That sounds pretty comprehensive to me. And also, you know, one can pick up lots of things, I think, immediately from that. And I'm sure there's lots for other people to learn in other areas apart from adult and children's care. I mean, I've written down handwritten thank you, so you might get a handwritten thank you from me.
It's what I won't forget.
So, are there anyone? We've got about quarter now. So, if anyone's got any questions or comments that they'd like to make, please raise your hands now. Bill. Yeah, Bill. Thank you.
Very much, Amy. One of the things that we're wrestling with our business and supporting the education sector is the issue of supervision. And supervision has come out of the social care world. With my experience of it, managers suddenly had this put on their shoulders alongside appraisal and performance management. And the policy said, well, get on with it and here's some training. And then one minute you're having a really difficult conversation about, are you performing and what's your caseload like? And then you take the one off, that office manager, and then you're supposed to be pastoral supportive supervisor. And guess what? Most managers couldn't manage that at all. 1 in 10 maybe, and the thing didn't work well. So an aspect we're looking at is non-managerial supervision, where that confidentiality of conversation, unless really dramatic, can take place in a safe space once removed. I noticed you didn't mention the supervision word at all, and it's a strange one anyway in my book. Has that been looked at as part of what you've been doing?
Supervision was mentioned as part of the training by the social workers, and particularly, like you've said, around targets and, you know, have you met your targets? Appraisals fell at a really awful time. So appraisals had just happened before we went, or were happening when we went into this training. So people were really grappling with that. In terms of how the supervision is managed, I don't know the details because I'm not a social worker myself. I can certainly find out if they tackle kind of both aspects of that during their supervision. But certainly the well-being conversation that I've been told about post-training has been happening in team meetings rather than supervision. I assume they still touch on it in supervision, but where they've been carving out this well-being time, that's been in a team meeting. But I know what you mean, it's not a smooth transition, is it, to talk to somebody about their targets 1 minute and their well-being the next. But I can certainly take the question back and find out how that's tackled and whether that is dealt with in supervision every, you know, week, or do they just do it once a month? I don't know, but I can ask and let you know.
Thanks very much. Anybody else got any comments, questions? Guy.
Is the training material you used available for the rest of us, possibly, or available that we could use ourselves and tailor towards our teams?
It would be down to our speakers. So our two speakers, Lucy didn't use any slides, so it was all just everything she said. And our other speaker did use slides, but part of our agreement was it was all to stay within ECC. So certainly I can, you know, pass on our other speakers' details. You've probably got David's if you want to have conversations with them about that. As I say, Thurrock already have done, and they're coming up with something very similar for them. So it's probably quite a straightforward thing to do.
Anything like the goal or just the outline of what you were presenting and what you were putting together would be really good to take through to our teams and our parts of the councils to see if they would be up for doing it themselves, like Thurrock.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'd be really good. Thank you.
Certainly share the objectives we came up with, and the kind of initial scoping document that Emma and I wrote, I'm sure we'd be happy to pass that on.
Emma, did you want to say something?
No, Amy just beat me to it, where I said we've done a scoping paper. It had all the aims and objectives on there, and how we delivered it. So I'm sure that can be shared. Yeah.
Well, of course, we do know Lucy very well indeed, and she's been presented at many things on for the EPS and so on. And in fact, she's actually also a member of the Human Aspects Group. So it may be that we might follow up another event with Lucy, and perhaps again yourself, Amy, so that we might pursue this further and see if how it could relate to other areas of the different works that people do.
Yeah, Peter, I was going to say that we actually could do that and tie it into the webinar.
Yeah. And
do a full session and bring in Lucy.
We haven't told about the webinar yet.
No, we haven't. That's a big surprise at the end.
Not now. Not now.
Libby, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, Julie, yes.
Libby?
Yeah. In relation to a comment, Peter, that's in the sidebar from Matt Hogan, interested on what has been done to respond to the feeling forgotten about. I've got friends who work in social care, and they really do. I don't think I've been listening out for in reports, and when people are saying about support for all workers, social care has been quite, to my mind, quite starkly, disregarded and missed out on many sort of levels. How do you deal with that when it's every bit as important as what's going on with NHS workers and other key workers?
I think in some of our previous huddles, this has again come out in terms of emergency planners. There's been mention of all this work being going on nationally and by all various people, and then seem to have forgotten there's actually been emergency planners doing a lot of this work, for years. So I think it's a widespread thing, and the problem is, of course, you select a group like NHS who obviously deserve a great support, and then others do get forgotten, I think it's an important thing which we need to try and get across. I see a few heads nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the only thing I was actually going to come, I think Jeannie and yourself and Peter, you said it, but it was Beth, obviously mentioned about the webinar, obviously for later, but it was about the fact that, taking upon Guy said, obviously Thurrock Council, I think we've probably across the board, we've probably got representatives that we would want to actually see that to then deliver back to our own, because I don't think they're going to be able to go across the whole country and deliver this for every single council. So actually, I think it's about the way that we can bottle it and actually move that across. So yeah, thank you.
The other thing was, I was actually speaking to people in the chemical industry, not necessarily anybody that you would think was frontline, and they were saying that when they're sitting at home in their offices, so working from home, if they get calls from customers or whatever, their home used to be their safe space, and now it's not, because they're getting not very nice calls from customers or whatever at home. So this is starting to have a huge impact on people, not just within the specific sort of central area, but in actual fact, and I was speaking to one of my colleagues for a GP, and he was saying exactly the same thing. When he's doing, virtual or calls by telephone, and he's at home and he's speaking to patients that are not necessarily very well, or are just really frustrated about what's going on, instead of their home being the safe place, the place that they escape to at the end of the day, it's all sort of intruding into it. So it's all very relevant across the across everywhere, in places that we perhaps didn't actually think about.
Yeah, this debate's been going on in management magazines as well, Jeannie. So again, I think everybody's been affected by this. Julie, you've still got your hand up. Do you? No, okay. Anyone else wanting to make any comments or ask any questions?
Just one thing which came up today. talking with senior managers about how they're getting ready for the big three: winter pressures, COVID, and Brexit, all at the same time, and Christmas, and all the things that's going to happen at once. One of our lead for social care actually raised the issue of they're not sure what they're going to do with staff who won't take the vaccine, and what that might mean in social care, in able to then go into people's houses because they don't have the vaccine. Therefore, wearing masks and stuff might not be an option, and families might not allow them into the building. So there's a big question which got asked, and we then passed it on to the HR team to go, what do we do with staff who won't take the vaccine? Because we can't force them, and it was sort of discussed. It was said, well, if they can't do their job, then we get rid of them. You know, that was sort of said by HR, which I must admit was that came a bit hard from HR on an off the cuff moment, saying something like that. But it is something that we are all going to have to look at in the near future, especially a social care team. That we were very lucky in the fact that all our social carers are very young, so they're going to get it at the end of the process. So there's an issue there on, you know, if they're going into properties where people can't take the vaccine and they're continually running and they don't have the vaccine, when do people say, I'm not happy for you to come in or go anywhere? And that connection then, which is meant to be built up, is lost, or trust is lost. And as was being discussed by Amy, you know, wearing masks and things is detrimental to some of the people they'll be going to be dealing with. So it is something we need to think about as well. What do we do when people don't do what we would expect them to do, which is, you know, take the vaccine? Even doctors and things are saying they're not going to do it, and let alone, you know, social services or teachers or anybody like that. So what are the responses? And I don't have an answer to it, but it's another great problem to think about and worry about if when you're trying to get to sleep at night. One other thing just quickly is, you will notice house prices, if you've got a shed or an outbuilding that you can either turn into an office or is already an office, the house prices will jump dramatically, and it's been seen everywhere. I know about 3 or 4 of my friends who have taken money they were going to use and are now buying sheds in the back of their garden for offices in their garden to separate from their homes. So your house prices may be going up or down depending.
Amy, you want to come back, I think, do you?
Yeah, I was just interested in what Guy was saying about I'm sorry, I'm not sure what organisation you work for, but your social workers being younger and therefore being the top of the bottom of the pile, but ours are being prioritised along with front-line NHS staff. So we're anticipating ours to be rolled out really soon.
That's really an interesting question, because there seems to be a very mixed message on that of, are they priority or not? Because their feeling is they're not priority. The NHS are getting it, but they're not, and they're not prioritised in the guidance coming out from government.
Ours are going to be, so this is going to be, we are thinking of you. Here's the vaccine.
Yeah.
With the NHS.
Yeah, that would be really nice actually from the government, because that would actually make them feel better. At the moment, they're feeling, you know, that
they do want it.
Well, some of them might not, but most of them do, and they feel like they've been ignored. The NHS, as you said, have got everything, and they're being ignored on the front line. And there's not clear guidance.
Definitely in Essex, we're prioritising them, and I haven't heard of any pushback on that. We've come up with our own internal list of the order in which the social care teams are going to get it, and we're expecting them really early January.
Of course, in that there's another recurring theme is the accuracy and clarity of the messaging that's going out, especially from national government. I think probably, is there any immediate other questions? Because I think we need to move on if we may. Anyone got anything urgent they want to at this stage? I can't see any hands up. No. Okay. Well, thanks very much indeed, Amy. As I said, I have written down about handwritten thanks. Although I'll probably have to email it to you. So if we then maybe move on, and I'm really very grateful for a member of HAG+CR, Julie Hicks, who's going to speak next. She's a senior civil contingencies advisor for Welsh Government, and she's going to talk about a personal COVID-19 a personal reflection from a professional's perspective. Julie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you, Amy. That was a very interesting session indeed. And good evening, everybody. And it's really good to see so many of us here together on the huddle. I'd just like to begin by justifying the title of my reflection, specifically in relation to the reason why I feel I'm able to refer to myself as a professional emergency planner. I'm going to just share a photograph as I go through this, and just try and share the screen. It worked in practice. Hopefully it will now.
Yep, that's beautiful.
Okay. Okay, so I originally trained as a graphic designer and a teacher. And I taught for 18 months and disliked it so much, I left to have 3 children in 4 years. And on reflection, I think teaching was the easier option. I have to own up to being a bit of a believer in fate, as when I was looking to get back into the workplace after my children were born, I just happened to see an advert in the local paper for a part-time local authority emergency planning assistant, with either a graphics or a teaching background. Now, I of course knew about graphics and teaching, but I had no idea what emergency planning was. So I applied, and the rest, as they say, is history. Now, this was in 1986, and I went on to work full-time as an emergency planning officer with the responsibility for training and exercises, then a unitary authority emergency planning manager, where I followed Essex's lead in setting up a crisis support worker scheme that continues to this day. I'm very proud of that, that prepares social care staff to work with police family liaison officers to support bereaved families after emergencies. Then in 2009, I became Welsh Government Senior Health Emergency Planning Advisor, advising the NHS in Wales, where I worked on pandemic flu preparation, mass casualty and mass fatality arrangements. And then in 2018, I moved to my current role within wider Welsh Government Resilience Team as a Senior Civil Contingencies Advisor to local resilience forums in Wales. I still held responsibility for mass fatality planning and also community resilience. I also did my emergency planning diploma with Coventry University in 2005, so I have a professional qualification. I've also been a member of the faculty at Loughborough University, teaching on the diploma in health emergency preparedness, resilience and response. And I can't believe the years here, but I've always supported the Emergency Planning Society. And I checked on the dates, and I first became a member of the Emergency Planning Association before it merged in 1993. This incredibly shows my age, with the old SEPO, County Emergency Planning Officer Society, before it became, as I say, merged to become the EPS in 1993. I've been the Public Relations Officer and the Training and Events Officer for the Welsh branch of the EPS, and supported the Human Aspects Group from as far back as I can remember. And I was very, very happy to become a member of the group around about 2017, I think, although years and dates escape me a little as I'm reaching more senior years. But I think it's fair to say that some of the most satisfying areas that I've been involved in over the years have been in relation to the human aspects of emergency planning and response. And I've been honoured to meet and hear presentations from many members of disaster action, which I'm sure many of you will have heard of. And I think it's true to say that they have been inspirational to me, particularly in terms of fueling my passion for constant improvement of how we work with those affected by emergencies, to ensure that we all have as positive an experience as is humanly possible in what may be the most traumatic event that they and we experience. So, as you can see, I have many years' experience in emergency planning. I'm passionate about it, and I do consider myself a professional through the many years of experience and the many people I've had the honour to work with But this leads on to my personal reflection, and hopefully you'll be able to see how my professional role affected how I responded to my event, both in a negative and hopefully, more hopefully, in a positive way. And the pictures you see in front of you here, I'm the fourth of 5 daughters, all born over a 15-year period. So I've been fortunate enough to grow up with 3 older sisters, Janet, Val and Jill, and 1 younger sister, Susan. Sadly, my sister Val died 11 years ago after being diagnosed with terminal cancer. Now, while this was a very, very, very sad experience, I had the privilege of spending as much time as I could with her. And as her health declined, I was able to support her retain as much dignity as was humanly possible. I was also at her bedside, together with her children, my niece and my nephews, and my other sisters on the night she died. Early last year, in 2019, apologise, my sister Jill fell and badly broke her leg. She had an urgent operation that sadly failed and left her unable to walk at all. And she was due to go back in for a second operation in September 2019. But this was cancelled. And eventually she received a date for the second operation in February this year. So Jill had the operation and was recovering slowly, but all looked good for a positive outcome. She was really looking forward to returning home to a new flat and being able to get around unaided for the first time in over a year, without the constant need for carers, and also to seeing the new floor that her son had laid for her. However, on Friday the 20th of March, just before the UK went into full lockdown, she had a temperature and she was tested for coronavirus. I was due to go and see her that Friday evening, but because things were getting really busy in work, I phoned to let her know that I'd visit on the Saturday instead. But on that Saturday morning, we received the news that none of the family wanted to hear, that Jill had tested positive for the dreaded virus and had contracted it in the very place that she was supposed to be being looked after. So I phoned, only to hear my dear sister struggling to make herself understood through the oxygen mask that she'd been given. I said I'd visit that afternoon, but Jill didn't want to put me at any risk. So I promised to be with her as soon as it was safe to do so. Sadly, this was the very last conversation I had with my lovely big sister, as despite trying many, many times to ring her, when I rang her phone, it went into answer phone. So my niece, Carolyn, Jill's daughter, spoke to the hospital on a Saturday afternoon after I'd tried ringing, and was told in no uncertain terms that they were very busy and could only speak to 1 member of the family. Obviously, I felt sad, but I fully understood the pressure that staff must have been under, so I let this pass. All day on the Sunday, Carolyn checked in on her mum and kept me up to date of the comfortable position that Jill was in. So you can only imagine how shocked we both were when, on the Monday morning, the nurse told Carolyn, and this is her actual words, that Mum is obviously very poorly and won't be with us much longer. She was then told not to phone again, as they would contact her when anything changed. And all this time we weren't allowed to visit or see or speak to Jill in any way at all. I can't explain the helplessness I felt when at 10:40 a.m. on Tuesday, the 24th of March, my niece phoned to say that her lovely mum, my lovely sister, had died that very morning. Now, the void I felt was darker and deeper than anything I'd felt when my sister Val, my dad, and my dear mum died. I felt disbelief, coupled with immense sadness that I hadn't been able to hold her hand, smooth her forehead, and talk to her when she must have needed me most. And even though I knew from all the pandemic exercise scenarios that I've been involved in that extraordinary measures might have to be put in place to deal with such an event, I now felt myself living through what I'd only ever played at before. I felt disappointed in myself that even with all my knowledge of public health procedures for dealing with infectious diseases, mortuary and funeral arrangements for my work with CSWs and mass fatalities, that I was so unprepared and unable to affect anything in a way that was of use. Staff then in the hospital lost my sister's personal belongings. But then with the help of the EP lead, Sarah, who I knew very well as a consequence of my time advising NHS Wales, they were actually found in a ward that had been emptied and was undergoing deep cleaning. However, what started as a joy that Sarah had found Jill's things very quickly turned into horror. When I arrived outside the hospital to pick up Jill's things, I watched in disbelief as a pile of black bin bags on a rattling metal trolley were wheeled towards me. Now the horror got worse as I saw a sticky white label on one with Jill's surname scribbled on it. Jill had been in hospital for over a month and was in her own room, so she'd obviously acquired lots of blankets, gifts, cards, books, etc. And what added to my sadness in what I experienced was the fact that I trained with these hospital staff in the past, and I expected better. Not from the EP lead, who was amazing, but from the ward staff who seemed to have gone into panic mode and forgotten a lot of what they'd previously been taught. I also became hypersensitive to the number of deaths being reported and fixated on the cold way that they seemed to be being displayed on TV. Jill was number 17 to die in Wales, and even now I can't see the number anywhere without it stopping me in my tracks. The next surreal experience was planning Jill's funeral. Now I'm studying at the moment for a diploma in civil celebrancy, and again I expected my knowledge to somehow kick in to make me feel in control of things. But no, I let myself down again. My niece and I had to let many relatives and friends know that they wouldn't be able to join us as one of the 10 that were allowed into the crematorium. But one act of kindness that I remember more than anything is a man on the gate at the crematorium who, when he counted 11 of us in the cars, my great nephew had his girlfriend with him, he allowed her in too. Now, as a professional emergency planner with over 30 years experience, and as I said earlier, a particular interest and responsibility for training and exercise design, I've written numerous pandemic scenarios, many with questions to partners about dealing with family and friends of the deceased. Suddenly to find myself in the position of someone I had made up, I found it really difficult to correlate what was actually happening, if that makes sense. Now I imagine it's how anyone in emergency planning feels if their loved ones die as a result of something that they've been on the other side of. Now, I've been back in work off and on due to shingles and hemiplegic migraine since May, and some colleagues find it difficult even now to know what to say to me, despite my reassurance that I'm okay to talk about Jill. In fact, it does me good. But sadly, I've been taken off the work of the mass fatalities group, despite saying I'd be okay to continue. This is an example of a colleague thinking he was doing the right thing, but without talking to me first. So why have I been asked to share this with you? Well, as with the dear people in disaster action who've also lost loved ones in tragic circumstances and have shared their experiences to make us better at what we do, I've tried to think of a few tips that I'd like to share with my emergency planning colleagues as a consequence of my experience. There's only 3, but we need to take care when planning exercises involving deaths. We need to treat every scenario with respect, even if we're playing at it. And as responders, please, in the words of Lance Corporal Jones in Dad's Army, don't panic. Remember your training. And even when faced with the unexpected, please take the time to remember to treat people with dignity, above all, that is demanded of you. And I think the one tip I'd share on a personal level, but again, for those of us in the profession, is do not be too hard on yourself. Okay, even if you've rehearsed the response to emergencies, you still won't know how it's going to affect you until it does. Thank you.
Julie, thank you very much. It's quite difficult to respond to that without breaking the voice. And we are really honoured by you sharing that with us. And as you said, it's vital for us all to remember that, because we are caring for people, not plans or things or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, it's up to you whether you want to take any questions or not at the moment. Please feel free to say no. We'd entirely respect that. But I wonder if anyone has anything question that they would like to raise with Julie.
Yeah, that's fine, Peter. It's emotion, but it's I can cope with it, and I want to use it to help if I can in any way at all.
Has anybody got any questions or comments they'd like to make?
That's fine.
Julie, thank you ever so much for that. Incredibly powerful, and I think actually that should be shown on every YouTube and every social media just to get to people properly, because so many people just don't understand, and I don't, and I think what you just told us has helped to make understanding a little bit better. Having worked in this field for so many years, your experience of giving training and exercising, I've been thinking about all the exercises I've done where I've introduced deaths and those sort of things, and thinking back to, you know, planning for 9/11 and how we deal with death and mass casualty sessions after 7/7 and the like, and all the training which went on in the noughties, when we all started looking at that for the first time.
Yes.
There is the saying that, you know, people can connect with the death of 3, 4, 5 people, but 1,000 people is just a number you can't comprehend, which is why America at the moment is having so many problems.
Yeah.
How would you suggest to us we might better word those sort of situations? Because it is something that we don't, as a human nature, we don't want to talk about death. It's incredibly difficult. I wonder how many people on the group here tonight actually have had that conversation with their family in the last couple of months, questioning about what they would do and what people want in, you know, with if they couldn't speak or what was going on. How would you suggest we take that into the future in our training and exercising to make it real and to make it actually so people think about it and have to think about it, which is often so difficult that people walk out the room and go, I'm not going to play this game, it's so stupid. It's never going to happen like that, which is we've all faced.
We have, Guy, and thank you. That's a really good question, and one that I've asked myself as a result of having written scenarios and being involved in being guilty, if you like, of looking at the numbers game without genuinely understanding, or no, not understanding. I understand that each one of those is an individual with the family and everything that goes behind it, but somehow because of what we do, we have to look at it in a scale type situation and a numbers game, if you want. Mark Drakeford, the Welsh Minister, actually in his reports when he was saying about the numbers, he was the only person that I saw actually stopped when he said the number. Okay, almost to just pay respect to that number being, you know, 17 individuals. And what are we in the numbers of 60,000 plus now? There's small things you can do, and it is small things, because we have to deal in numbers. We obviously have to see what resources we have to deal with what numbers, what will tip us over the edge. You know, I get it, I understand that, but I think in the way in which we speak about the numbers, to just pause and just give time to reflect on that, so that we don't say, oh, another 30 deaths today, another 33, and it becomes it becomes a numbers game in that respect. We need to just pay that respect every time we're talking about it. So it's not a big thing, but it makes a huge difference. And as I say, Mark Drakeford is the only person I've seen. I tried to avoid watching them, to be honest with you, as much as I can, but he was the only one that actually did that made me feel for a moment that he understood. He understood that. And I think with colleagues who sort of switch off, and I mean, I've always talked about death. And my kids think I'm a bit morbid. I wanted to buy funeral plans for Christmas for people and all sorts of things along the way. So I've never found it difficult, but I've always appreciated that some people do. So I try to make it more normal, if you like. And I've told colleagues in work, please talk to me. I want to talk about my sister. Don't shy away from it, you know, and I'll tell you if things are getting too much, like I would say to you tonight. We have to get better at doing that. Now, but it's a very, very personal thing, and I totally respect those who have that difficulty, but it mustn't stop us trying.
Thank you. Stephen, I think you have your hand up. Stephen?
Thank you, Julie, for sharing this evening. I really appreciate it. As somebody who's worked for many years in acute trust and within the NHS, I wondered if you had spoken about your experience with the trust, perhaps through the patient liaison service or anything like that, because I think part of my experience of working in London Trust during the first and second part of the COVID response, I'm now in a slightly different regional role, but a lot of nursing and clinical colleagues needed to be reminded of those basic things that they do all of the time, because they were so mission focused on other elements, and it was in my limited experience not it wasn't something that they were trying not to do, but perhaps no one was reminding them or giving them the feedback that they should be doing. And I wondered if you had an opportunity to speak to the hospital directly to feed into that wider piece of learning. And I think as well, what's really interesting for me is that when we were looking at excess death planning within a pandemic scenario, I'd never thought your comments earlier about the methodology of returning personal belongings. I've never been in that situation personally, so it's not something I've ever considered in how it's done or how it should be done, and I think that's a really human point about feeding that into surge planning within mortuary planning, and I think there's a lot of powerful things that you said tonight which should help to inform us all to be better planners. But yeah, I just wondered that point.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. And yes, I have. Well, I've spoken to my colleague Sarah, who was the very, very wonderful woman, emergency planner, that helped me find and locate Jill's belongings, because we tried through the wards and that didn't work. And so I tried with Sarah, and she went out of her way to actually go back into the hospital, PPE, go into the ward where Jill was, speak to people, and actually found them. So I've spoken to her. The problem, and my niece is and has been very, obviously very upset, and then she lost her partner a few months later to cancer, so she's been in terribly traumatic areas. because Jill's initial leg operation had failed and she should have gone in for a second operation in September. They were already looking at making some comments with regard to her treatment for her leg. So that was already sort of in motion. So I've gone through my emergency planning colleagues and made my comments, and hopefully, because I've worked with them for years, and trained with them in this very sort of nature of things. So I'm feeding it in via that route, and I hope to continue to do that, and with my other colleagues across Wales in the NHS. So I'm speaking and sharing experiences with them to hopefully, you know, hopefully get better at what we do. And I do feel, and I really did feel at the time, that everybody had seemed to go into complete panic mode and forgot everything that they've been taught. And I can totally understand that. But even if the name tag on Jill's bags had said her full name and been written nicely, but it was scribbled, you know, it's simple, small things, and not in black bin bags, which were tied like rubbish bags. You know, it just, and it's those. So yes, I am feeding them in through my emergency planning colleagues, and not through other routes at the moment. But I do want, and I do hope that they'll help.
My only observation would be that the two chief nurses of the two acute trusts that I've worked in have always been incredibly receptive, having this type of direct patient-centered feedback for them, because they're in charge of their nursing staff. So it may also be another avenue, but you know, it's not for me to tell you what
no, I've noted
forward.
No, thank you, Stephen. Whatever avenues and whatever routes I can do to hopefully improve it for others going forward.
And thank you very much for sharing. It was really really insightful, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is one of the reasons that in the HAG we'd like to make it compulsory for everybody to read Collective Convictions, which is the story of disaster action. And as Julie would say, and as Emma also, it does tell the story of those who have been, like Julie, not deliberately necessarily, but badly treated, and their feelings and so on ignored when they have become involved in incidents and when they have lost loved ones or been affected by this. I think also there's a lesson to be learned. I don't know whether anyone knows much about them, swan nurses, who have actually, I believe, done quite a good deal of help work on this. And for example, making sure that when someone comes to view someone who's died, that they make sure that it's in pleasant surroundings and that it's more comfortable and so on and peaceful for someone. And I think thirdly, I mean, as a clergyman, I've taken a lot of funerals in my in my career, and I think one of the most difficult things for many people to do is to cope with other people's pain, and they just don't know how to manage it, and therefore they ignore it or they turn away or whatever. And so it is essential, I think, for us in our roles to actually face this so that we can really help people in the darkest hours when they are suffering very deeply, not from the physical wounds, but from the emotional crisis and pain that they have. Louise, do you want to say something?
It was just a quick question to say, just to say thank you to Julie, and also to ask whether you think that your role as a professional emergency planner actually, do you think that it made it harder for you in any way, because it sounds like you felt like you should have responded better, or you should have done something differently that would have made a difference. So I just wondered if that was true.
Yeah, thank you very much, Louise. And yes, I certainly did. I can't, even on the day that I was told that that Jill had died, I suddenly thought, well, it's okay, because I know what's going to happen now. I know we're in lockdown, so I know there'll be different restrictions, and I'd already had to accept the fact that I wasn't able to be with her when she died. I had to then accept that I couldn't go and see her in the funeral home. I had to accept that, you know, we're a large family, but only a very small percentage of people could go. And I knew those things because I'd been in the planning and we talked about them. And I felt like that should somehow help me cope with it better, but it didn't. I was able to sort of advise my niece, and I felt positive that I was able to do that, so I could maybe prepare her a little, but it didn't stop me feeling any better, but any more prepared to deal with having to actually do the things that I talked about in training. And I felt disappointed in myself that somehow, you know, even though I knew all these things, I still felt completely, totally just in that black hole. And yeah, I think, I don't know what the answer to it. I think now, months on, I want to do something good with it. So it's a better place now, and I feel at least I may be able to help in some, even if it's just for one family, help in some small way. And a friend of mine lost her mum to COVID 2 weeks ago, and I was on a Zoom funeral this afternoon, but I've been able to help Carol and hopefully be there if she needs to talk to me. So, you know, I can start seeing a little light at the end of the tunnel and know what I can do. But in the immediate few weeks, I did feel so disappointed and angry with myself for not being able to cope better, for having that prior knowledge and understanding.
Thank you. Libby.
Thank you, Peter. Can you hear me okay? Julie, thank you very much for sharing that again with us. It's just such a powerful message once again. So I thank you very much. And I think one of the things that, you know, listen to it again is it's about what we can do as well, because oh, sorry, my dog's come to join me. Sorry about that. Going attention. I think for me, when I always hear things like this, and when you're, you know, I've had not something. It's very sort of, you know, when you're trying to do something on behalf of somebody else as well, and you're talking, because from a professional position, you knew somebody at that hospital that could help you. What about the people who don't have somebody that they know? And I think it's about that side of it as well. And I just think everybody is incredibly busy, and that we know that across the country, in Wales, Scotland, and obviously in the UK, also in England as well, there's peaks and troughs about how busy people are with regards to where they are within the next peak, and obviously getting prepared for the one after that as well. And I just wonder whether if we could share something, you know, those messages as well, with emergency planning colleges, that's already been said as well, across the trusts, so that whilst we think about, you know, well, we've got time, a little bit of downtime, even if we've got that at the moment, or a breather, because it will escalate, you know, beyond comprehension again, sadly. I mean, it's that opportunity now to say, actually, what is the right, you know, how is this better done? So I think, you know, it would be really good to try and put some of those messages in with our emergency planning colleagues across everybody, especially sort of, you know, who are dealing with, you know, that message and giving those items back and things like that as well, for lots of different things. But yeah, no, thank you very much for that. Again, it's very powerful, and I've learned, you know, like yourself, listening to people from disaster action and lots of incidents. For me, that's how I've learned throughout my career. For me, that's the most powerful part of it. And if, you know, and there are times that we might not get it right, but we absolutely, we need to follow those things. So thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, I mean, the disaster action have been inspirational to me in almost all the key things that I've done over the years and strived to do. But yes, I was fortunate knowing Sarah to have that inroad. Goodness knows what happened to the others, the 16 that went before my sister. I don't know. I
think, thank you again, Julie. And I think you have done something tonight, because all those on this call, I'm sure it has affected us all, and we'll take that away with us in our work, and hopefully we'll also share this with other people that we know, so that we will make sure that they have some understanding of the real pain that it is for those who suffer as a result of bereavement and loss. And that, I think, is a huge thing that you've done tonight. And thank you very much indeed for that. And as we know, this is being recorded, so if you feel yourself anyone feels themselves getting a bit complacent, then just play this recording, and you will remember what it's all about and why we are here and why we're doing the jobs that we do. I think probably it sounds a bit cruel, but I think we need to move on a little bit because it's getting towards the time we need to finish. We were going to have a question and answer session for a quarter of an hour or so until 8:15. There are just a couple of things that I would like to say. First of all, the Human Aspects Group has a number of has 3 categories of membership. Associates of people who are interested and wish to be keeping in touch with what's going on in human aspects and so on. Liaison members who are from other organisations which have an interest in human aspects. So, for example, we have someone from the Rail Delivery Group. Well, obviously they're concerned with running trains and things, but also they have their incident care teams, and so they're representatives as a continual contributor towards our meetings. And then there are core members, basically committed to action and to take this further. Not necessarily everyone are EPS members, and so if anyone is interested, do follow that up. I mean, either through an email through to the EPS, or you can find my email, Emma's email, and Libby's email on the website pages for the Human Aspects and Community Resilience Group team. Well, what we really wanted to finish off really this evening was to ask the question of you, where we go from here. We're hoping to relaunch the HAG in the new year, in May or thereabouts, possibly with a revision of the Human Aspects Guidance, key principles of human aspects, top tips for the human aspects in COVID-19. And as already has been let out of the bag by Jeannie right at the beginning, the possibility of further webinars on perhaps this subject and a lot of other subjects too. So can I just throw it open to discussion for anybody to make any suggestions in the last sort of few minutes as to what we might do and what you would like us to do and how you might like to be involved. So over to you. I can't see any hands going. Oh, Nathan.
Hiya, Peter.
Hi.
I think the idea of some webinars is great, to get the idea, to get aspects of the various bits of human aspects out there, and especially around community resilience, and potentially almost look at seasonal issues. So I know where I am, down in the southeast, we're currently looking at flooding prep, and in about 3 months' time we'll be looking at wildfire prep, and how we support our local communities that are regularly impacted on that, and not just the community resilience side, but also those human aspects of how do we support a community that every year they may well flood, and those impacts come year after year. So no, the webinars would be a really good idea, and I'll definitely be dropping you an email about supporting the HAG.
Great, thank you. Yes, I mean, we have had in some of our workshops, we've looked at the flooding issue, but of course, when someone's been flooded, that again is something that's a long-lasting effect on people. The fear of of the sound of raindrops on the roof when you've been flooded several times. It's there's some very raw human emotions raised through that. One of the things we have thought about briefly is Oh, mine's gone a blank, Emma. The Teams thing. Critical, not critical care teams. You know what I mean, Emma?
Crisis support.
That's it.
Crisis support. Sorry.
Yes, yes. You have to make allowances for my age, which is probably greater than most of you are actually viewing this tonight. So again, that's an issue that there are a number of critical care teams that are around. It ties in with the psychosocial support and so on. And I think there's a lot that could be shared in that sort of area too. Any other comments or suggestions before we sort of wind up?
Just one last, just one last one for something regarding. I'm business continuity, pretty much primary, and have been for many, many years. One of the things on the CCA is the promotion of business continuity to businesses, so they're prepared. It's one of the things that often gets missed out in EP is that we deal with people as residents, but we don't deal with businesses. And businesses often, when they collapse, flooding, fires, whatever it might be, it has a massive impact on both the person involved in the business and their family and the whole community. It'd be really good to have some sort of discussion around, especially coming out of with Brexit and COVID and all the people who've lost jobs and that side of things. And the expectation is, you know, when people lose their jobs, often they start new businesses, you know, their own thing, which often fail in the first year. So there will be this dramatic thing. And it's a really good chance as well to push the message of getting your own plans and thinking about it out to the community. Again, something which I'm going to be doing very, very soon and working with our teams to do that specifically for new businesses and creating some sort of guidance for them and help. I'm just wondering if there's something we can do to help people cope as they create a new business for the first time and deal with the emotional issues of losing a job and possibly having a flood or dealing with their own disruption in their own households, whilst also dealing with setting things up, managing a major team or a new business or that side of things. It'd be really good to integrate that from just the care side into the business side, so we support the whole community in that way.
Thank you. Unless there's anything urgent, I think probably we ought to begin to wind up tonight, because it's past 8:15 now. Anything urgent that anyone else wants to raise? I can't see any hands up. Okay. Well, thank you for listening. Amy, thank you very much for your presentation. That was great, and I'm sure people want to, well, obviously people want to follow up on that, and so that'd be great for us to do. And I'm sure Emma will keep us in touch also with whatever you're doing there in Essex, which is great. And then Julie, again, thank you so much for that. And perhaps we could dedicate your talk and this evening to your sister Jill in thanksgiving for what she has given us through you.
Thank you so much. That is really, really kind.
And I think probably Jeannie, have we anything to say? Because that's this is the last one before. Oh no, there's an event on. There's a webinar coming up, isn't there?
No, unfortunately, we've had to postpone that. All I want to say is really thank you very much to all of you for sharing this evening. I think it's been incredibly useful, and there's so much learning in it. And again, I really look forward to the webinars we're going to have next year, because I think they'll be really powerful with the messages, because we are forgetting quite a lot of the stuff that used to be something that we would consider, and people being the centre of everything that we do should continue to do so. And again, because as Stephen was saying, it's about people focusing on COVID and mission critical, and they're forgetting about the whole people side of it, and what's the impact and consequences of not considering that as we go forward. So people who are actually working in it, the businesses, and the patients and family who are actually having to go through that. So thank you very much to all the speakers. I think it's been a brilliant, brilliant session. And again, if we can have a webinar January, February time, I think that would be absolutely critical going forward, especially going in the new year. It would be great to have a conversation about that. Again, not to be trite, but Merry Christmas and Happy New Year when it comes.
Jeannie, can we just say thank you to you for your time on these various sessions over the past weeks and months and the time you've given to it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. And I've no right to say this because I have no authority to do so, but I think thank you to all you and our colleagues from all those we have been supporting, because we need, you need to know that your work is appreciated by them and by your colleagues, some of whom are on this on the session tonight. So thank you everybody, and have a peaceful Christmas at any rate, and all the best for the new year.
Thank you, Peter. All the best to you, Peter. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Happy Christmas.
Take-
Hey, next year, make up for this one.
Yeah.
Here.
Happy Christmas. Jeannie, how have you had a haircut and I've failed so dramatically?
I haven't had one. It's just fuzzy. I was out in the rain.
Okay. I thought Nicola Sturgeon had given you special permission to get a haircut.
No.
I wasn't sure whether I missed the start, so I wasn't sure whether